isn't, my intent isn't to go through every single thing. And in fact, so what's on the agenda is what was available when I had Kelly put the agenda together. The bill number list is a lot longer now, and I think stuff has been added since the last time I had Kelly send it out to you. So after the meeting today, I will send you out an updated spreadsheet. But some of these I will go into in depth. Some of them I will just mention, but if you've got questions, because the list is, I don't know how many things are on there. There might be 30 or something. The list is quite long. But if you've got questions on anything, then I can see if I can, address your questions. So at the top of the list, the Auditors Association, I think you may know, but you may not. Every year we have what our association votes on as priority bills. And the priority bills are the ones that we're also asking WACO, the Washington Association of County Officials, to help us with in terms of lobbying and support. So this year's priority bills, the first one is House Bill 1241, and it's harassment of election officials. And it's sort of goes along with what we were just talking about. And what it does is it closes a loophole to make a Class C felony to harass an election official in any manner, not just cyber harassment. A bill got passed, I think, last year about cyber harassment. So if somebody was harassing you through email, for example, it became a Class C felony. But if they were standing in front of you or on the phone, it isn't. And that's still the case. If they're, if they're in person or if they're on the phone and harassing or threatening, it doesn't have the same level. It's not the same class of crime. And the auditors felt like, really, regardless of how it's done, it should be a felony to harass an election official in any manner. And we've had auditors. I have not had anybody physically threaten me. Some of the auditors have had. We've certainly, I've certainly had people tell me that I'm a big fat liar and a criminal, in fact, but they haven't, told me they're coming after me or they know where I live or, whatever it is. Some of the auditors have had, and again, this kind of harassment is why you're reading that the nationally states are losing their election officials. So we put this together to get all versions of harassment a Class C felony. The second bill is 1272, House Bill 1272, and this is a carryover from last year. You may or may not be aware, I probably talked about this last year. In the existing RCW, there are not uniform standards for voter pamphlet statements. The VP stands for voter pamphlet. There are different standards for statements in the state voter pamphlet as compared to statements in the local voter pamphlet. So there's an inconsistency. And where that causes a problem in particular is because Whatcom County in the primary ballot, in the primary voter pamphlet, prints the statements from state candidates if they have a primary election. We could get statements that are passed on to us from the Secretary of State's office that have been approved by them that don't meet the local requirements for us. And that usually happens around whether or not the person is only talking about themselves or not. The local rules say that in a candidate statement, a candidate is supposed to only talk about themselves, meaning they can't talk about their opponent. They can't do mudslinging or say, my opponent says they're going to do this and this and this, and you know, that's not true, or whatever it is they want to say about it. They can do that in the state pamphlets. They're not, by the local rules, they're not supposed to do that. So now you've got a candidate whose statement that they've submitted their filing to the state, their statement has been accepted by the state. It comes to the county, we're putting it in our local voter pamphlet, and all of a sudden the statement is, you know, we're holding everybody else, the local candidates, to our local rules, and we get these state statements and they don't comply. So we're trying to get that consistent. It also requires the pro-con committee members to live in the jurisdiction of the ballot measure. So this is another one where we've had a couple of people statewide who are send emails to all of the counties saying, tell me the next time the school districts are going to be on the ballot, and let me know if you're recruiting con committee members, because these individuals wanted to write con statements even though they didn't even live in the county. And we've since adopted local rules that say that pro-con committee members need to live in the jurisdiction of the ballot measure. So we have, that is an example of a rule that was adopted by our canvassing board. But this puts it in state law that says you don't get to write a pro-con statement if you don't actually live in the jurisdiction and would be able to vote on it. And then it prescribes steps the county auditors have to take if a jurisdiction doesn't appoint a pro-con committee. You know, that's always difficult. We've got a number of things that we require jurisdictions to do to prove to us that they've made an effort to get a committee. We often don't get con statements for schools and fire districts, for example. And so we have local rules that say you need to show that you've made a good faith effort to attract a con committee, because we think that it's more valuable to voters if they've got opposing points of view. And then if we don't get committees from the districts, then we post it on our website, but I don't know that I've ever gotten anybody that way that has stepped up to write it. So if you pay attention to the voter pamphlet, you may notice for a lot of races, for a lot of measures rather, there is no con statement. It's because they couldn't get a committee put together. And then it cleans up. There's some cleanup in the RCW around voter pamphlets, but this one's important to us, and we're hoping that we can get it through, although I will pass on that there are legislators that don't like this one because they like to be able to talk about their opponents in their statements. So they view it as shutting down free speech, and I want to say what I want to say. And so we don't know how much chance we have of getting this one through. The next one is HB 1048. We're not taking a position on this one. We're staying neutral. It's a Washington voter rights amendment, and it talks about allowing organizations to file complaints, and those filing complaints can be compensated by the jurisdiction for time spent assembling a complaint, and you know, some things. And this is one where it's like, you know, we're not opposed to it, we're not pro either, so we're just, it's a policy decision and we're letting it play out. House Bill 1158 is on advisory votes, and it abolishes advisory votes. We didn't bring this forward, but we're supporting it. It requires that the state voters pamphlet in even years contain information on the state budget, and requires the creation of fiscal impact statements for any bill passed into law. that increases or decreases state tax revenue. So there would be a bunch of additional information in the state voter pamphlet related to these bills, but it takes the advisory votes off the ballot. The advisory votes don't constrain anybody to anything. They could be viewed as they're informing the legislature, whether people liked the bill or they didn't, but they take up, as you may have noticed in some years, they take up huge real estate on the ballot. They push all the races down and onto the back second page, and you know, we get asked from voters, why are those even on here? And they're really, and for some reason they were written in such a way that they take precedent over everything, including the President of the United States, the legislators, the state offices, all are under these advisory votes. So there's this proposal would eliminate them and replace them with information in the voter pamphlet, and we think that's a good thing. The issue with real estate, it really can be a problem if you've got 10 or 12 advisory votes and an otherwise long ballot. It just pushes the ballots into huge length. House Bill 1174 is access for voters in jail. We're taking a neutral position on this. It requires the county auditor and the jail to have a staff person designated as a jail voting coordinator. Now, it also requires the county to have a jail plan for voting for the jail in their jurisdiction. And it requires the jails to provide access to information and materials around voting and voter registration to people who are incarcerated. We already do this. We have had a jail program in place for years. We have, Stacy is our designated jail coordinator. The jail we have a liaison officer that we work with from the jail. And we have a process in place to get voter registration materials, voter pamphlets, ballots to anybody in the jail that wishes to vote. So we already provide information and materials. We've got posters up. This also, what's missing off of this summary is that it requires the jail to allow the county into the jail to register inmates. That we currently don't do. It's the way our jail is, it's so small, and they're also short-staffed. It's a real security issue for us to be in there, and so we haven't done that. We let the liaison officer from within the jail do it. Work with the inmates if they want ballots and get the ballots taken back and forth. But I have provided input into the jail planning services that when we get a new jail facility, in my opinion, they need to plan for a vote center space during elections where we could provide an accessible voting unit, a drop box, registration services. It wouldn't be open all the time. It would be, you know, for a couple of days around election days, sort of like we do in the University Hub. So that's input that I provided. This bill doesn't allow for that. This bill just says the jail needs to let you in to register inmates. And I think it's got some traction. We don't know whether it will pass or not, but that's what this is doing, is expanding jail services has been a hot topic for the last couple of years. So that's that one. Automatic voter registration, House Bill 1229. It's a Secretary of State's bill. They've been working with proponents of it. The auditors are supporting it with some concerns. It's establishing some timelines, and the auditors have provided some input to do a revised, an amended version, because of the timelines that are written into this, Secretary of State, they mirrored what Oregon and Colorado do. And we don't have a problem, the auditors don't have a problem with doing automatic voter registration for enhanced licenses. The problem happens on the back end because it is requiring us to send a notice out within 5 days of the transaction. But it also, which means you've got this extra piece you have to do during an election is when it's a problem for us in terms of resources. It also says you're supposed to hang on to that registration. So you're supposed to send them a notice packet out that says you're registered to vote unless you don't want to be. Let us know if you want to opt out. So it's a back end opt out process. And then we're supposed to hold it for a certain number of days to wait to see if the voter is going to opt out, which then can cause a problem. The closer it gets to election day, the less chance that we have of actually mail this person a ballot. So they may think they're registered. They're not really registered because they're pending for so many days. And so we've recommended some changes to that, and we'll see where that goes. But this is another one, I think, there's a lot of interest in this. So I don't know, you never know. I mean, it isn't over till it's over. So I don't know how much support it has in the legislature, but we are not planning to go in testifying against it. So we'll see. House Bill 1443 talks about allowing a voter with a social security number to utilize online voter registration. It would only be the last 4 digits. Right now, you can only register online if you have a driver license or a Washington State ID card, because it pulls the signature from those cards. So when somebody registers online right now and they're using online voter registration, the signature we get for their registration is the one that they gave DOL for their driver license. This one, I have not gotten into the weeds on it, so I don't know where we get the signature from if they registered with the social, but that's what this is asking to be allowed, is that they can put their last 4 social numbers in. The HB 1475, the electronic ballot return, is one I was just actually talking to staff about this today. It's a proposal that it would allow, not currently, only UOCAVA voters. UOCAVA is our uniform and overseas voters. Currently, UOCAVA voters are the only ones that can return a ballot electronically. So about 50% of our UOCAVA voters sign up for email, and we email them the link to their ballot. It actually emails them the link to VoteWa, and they can get into VoteWa and they can see their ballot and they can vote it. They can print it off and they can email it back. They can take a picture of it and email it back. They can fax it, which, believe it or not, we actually do occasionally get fax ballots. You think nobody's using fax anymore, but occasionally we get fax ballots. They're the only group of voters right now that can do that. This expands those rights to voters with disabilities and eligible voters who are incarcerated to return their ballots electronically. But in this case, it would be through an online portal. So they would be submitting those ballots through a portal rather than emailing them to us or faxing them to us. And we like that because a portal is a more secure process. So VoteWa would have to be set up with an online portal, which they don't currently have. And the thing about emails is that the risk with emails is that there's a Trojan or something in the email. What you're doing when you take ballots through an email is you're getting an email from somebody you don't know, and you're having to click on a link. And if there's something toxic in that email, it can explode in your system. Now, we don't use our county internet to open our UOCAVA ballots for that reason. We open them up on the public net so that we won't we won't blow up the county system, but it's still not the best. And there's lots of recommendations against allowing people to email ballots back. So I like this because it expands services to voters with disabilities, which I think is really important. And it lets them return their ballot. We'd have to set up a portal, which I really like. This would force the idea of an online portal, and they'd be able to submit that ballot into the portal and not through an email. So that's what this one is doing. We are taking a neutral position on it. I personally like this bill, but I think not all of the auditors are necessarily in support of it, so we're staying neutral on it. SB 5047 is the companion to the earlier one I talked about for the WVRA update, and we're staying neutral on that. SB 5082 is the companion on advisory votes, which I talked about, and we're supporting that one. SB 5106 is related to changing district boundary timelines if there are changes for commissioners. Right now, the way the law reads, if you expand the county commission to 5 members, this requires that work, that the map be done 90 days before candidate filing, so that it gives the auditor's office time to get those changes in place to let voters know before they file, right? Because if you're changing boundaries, now when you've got people filing for office, they have to live in the district. And so you have to have enough time to work the maps. And so this is really, it's an administrative, we're supporting it because it's an administrative issue for auditors in terms of being able to get the work done correctly for filing. So that's what this is doing. SB 5112 is a companion on the automatic voter registration. SB 5140 is related to the Secure Act, and it requires the Secretary of State to contract out security testing of vote law to analyze system gaps and flaws that could lead to fraudulent registrations voting or duplicate registrations voting. So this is being proposed by this isn't coming out of the Secretary of State's office or the auditors. This was proposed by one of the legislators, and it's basically saying we want you to go hire somebody to come in and test the system. Senate Bill 5153 is public disclosure for the under 18s. When they changed the law last year that said you can, it's just messy kind of. It's like you can register to vote when you're 16. When you're 17, if you're going to be 18 by the general, you can vote on certain things in the primary. And if you're 17 and you're going to be 18 by the general, I think by the general, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, you can file to be a committee, a PCO, right? So now you've got these people that are under 18 years of age who are filing potentially for office and are voting in a primary. But the way the law currently reads, if you're under 18, all of your information is confidential. So we had to take those voters, and if you're disclosing a voter list, for example, you have to take that information off the voter list because they're under 18. And what this is doing is saying, look, if you're going to register to vote and you're going to actually vote, or you're going to file to be a PCO, then those records are disclosable when the voter becomes eligible to vote in an election instead of when they turn 18. It's like if you're going to vote, you're going to file for PCO, the data is disclosable. And the auditors support that. I do a lot of work with public disclosure, and I just looked at that and went, this is like way easier. I mean, if they're old enough to vote, they want to vote, then they're a voter, and that information needs to be out there. And, you know, there's certain information that we don't disclose with voter records. We don't disclose all of it, but the way it is right now, those voters have to be left off the voter list. And this is saying, yeah, that's not going to be the case. So we'll see where that goes. 5182 is a Senate bill, is about moving candidate filing, and the purpose for this, and we're supporting this one, it moves filing week back 2 weeks. And the reason that it does that is it creates consistencies for filing times across the state, and it requires that statements are due no earlier than 11 days after the end of candidate filing. And what part of what this does, a big chunk of what this does, is it gives the counties adequate time to get the filing done so they can get the voter pamphlets put together so they can get them sent out to the UOCAVA voters. Because the UOCAVA voters get mailed their ballots instead of 20 days before the election, 45 days before the election, which means UOCAVA ballots are going out already in June. And particularly for large counties that have hundreds of candidates and offices and tons of UOCAVA voters who they are mailing voter pamphlets to, we don't. We give our UOCAVA voters online access, but you still need to have the pamphlet put together. And increasingly where our filing day is scrunching up, and then we have to get the information from the state. So that's the other piece of it. So that was what was really causing us a problem, because we'd start working on our voter pamphlet, but we wouldn't have the data from the state. And we get for the large counties that mail their voter pamphlets, they were getting the data so late they couldn't get the voter pamphlet put together in time to mail it to the UOCAVA. So this is doing a couple of things. So it's making it so that we can get stuff done in an appropriate timeline. Senate Bill 5208 is the companion related to Social Security number for registration. 5209 is interesting. Senate Bill 5209. I'm sort of fascinated by this one, and you'll see that we do not have a position on this one yet. So the auditors have not voted on our position on this one. This came from Senator Hunt, and it's universal voting. And he really likes this one. It requires all eligible voters in Washington to register to vote unless they obtain a waiver, and to vote in all primary and general elections beginning with 2026. He modeled this on what they do in Australia or New Zealand or both. And he really likes this. People get very and I do too. We don't like it that voters don't vote. So this is basically saying this is part of your civic duty. You need to register and you need to actually vote if you don't have a waiver. And there's a lot of details about it that aren't worked out, because there's actually a fine that goes along with it if you don't do one of these things or both of these things. And the question gets to be, well, who's going to enforce it? And you know, those questions haven't been answered really. But anyway, that's what this is doing. And yeah, it'll be interesting. And I don't know what the auditor's position on it is going to be. So there you go. Voter education campaigns. Senate Bill 5378 is interesting. The auditors have concerns about this because it's very prescriptive. This is targeted specifically if, let's see, I have to think about this because it's a little bit backwards. We don't actually have ranked choice voting adopted in the state yet. Well, the city of Seattle did. So the city of Seattle voted in ranked choice voting. And so what this is doing is saying that if a district decides that it wants to go with an alternative form of voting, they will be required to conduct a voter education campaign with specifically outlined standards for a year preceding the primary election for that jurisdiction. So in the case of King County, if this passed, they implement in 26, I think Julie said. They would have to start in 2025, a year before the primary, to put together this education campaign. And the jurisdiction is responsible for the costs. So not the auditor, not the county, the jurisdiction that has adopted it. A voter within the jurisdiction can sue if they don't feel that campaign is meeting the prescribed standards, and not meeting the standards or timeline is grounds for the jurisdiction to revert back to the normal method of conducting primaries. So the concerns from the auditors was how prescriptive it was, because it really was requiring this sweeping, you have to use TV and you have to use radio and you have to do, you know, and depending on the size of the jurisdiction, they may not even have access to some of those outlets. So that's part of it. But the intent is, you know, from a person who's looked at the potential of getting ranked choice voting and how one would do the voter education, which seems to me the most complicated thing about it. Making sure that the education is out there and people can follow it so they can know how to vote correctly. That's always been a concern of mine. And what this is doing is saying the district has to do this. It can't just all, they have to work with the auditor, but the way it is right now with ranked choice voting, the auditor's office would be completely responsible for doing all of the voter outreach. There's no responsibility on the district at all. This says if the district wants to do an alternative form of voting, they have to do outreach. So that's what this is doing. Senate Bill 5459 on elections public records requests is one of my favorites, and it's at the top of my list because I've been spending so much of my time on public records requests, and I also coordinate a touch base group with all of the counties because so many of our requests were coming in to multiple counties or statewide. And we were trying to keep track of the requests and help each other make sure we were responding appropriately and consistently. And I've been leading that sort of ad hoc group. So I'm also a trained records manager, but we talked to the legislature, had reached out to us about this because they knew that the auditors were really getting slammed with these requests. And one of the things that keeps getting asked for is cast vote records. And it's high on everybody's list that doesn't trust the election process, and cast vote records by interpretation by any of the prosecutors, AGs that we've talked to. Cast vote record is a version of a ballot. Ballots are exempt from public disclosure by statute. And the definition of a ballot is any representation of vote marks. It could be the paper ballot, it could be the image, it could be the cast vote record, which is an electronic representation of how somebody voted. We just keep getting pushback from people who say, well, you're interpreting it wrong and the case law doesn't apply, which isn't true. There was actually a lawsuit over this. So there's case law. And so this is doing a couple of different things. One, it explicitly states that ballots, ballot images, and cast vote records are exempt from public disclosure. So it just puts it in black and white. A cast vote record is a ballot, it's exempt. The other thing it requires that I really like is that public records requests for information contained in vote law needs to go to the Secretary of State to be responded to. The problem we have with this one is that some of the counties have the advanced report generating software that allows them to filter the data and respond to some of the searches that are being asked. And some of us don't. Whatcom is one that doesn't. And so I get the request and then I have to look at it and talk to Amy and say, can we even do this? And then no, we don't have that ability. And then I have to talk to the state and then I send the requester off to the state. And the fact is that vote law belongs to the state. So the data is in the servers that are maintained by the state. We don't have local voter records here. I don't have a local copy of the voter registration data. We get it off of the servers that the state manages and maintains. And so my perspective from a public records officer has always been, they are the primary agency for these requests because they're the holder of the original information. And this memorial puts it in statute that says that's how that works. And it not only does it make it easier for the counties to respond, it makes sure that responses are going out with consistent information. My concern leading this group has been, if the state's responding, are they responding the same way that the county would if the county had the data? And so this is laying it out that they would have to do this, and the auditors wholeheartedly support this one. So we'll see where this goes. And the Secretary of State is okay with it. So we're hoping this will go through. It's not an intent. It's not in any way an intent not to let people have data. It just is about which agency is going to respond. HB 1237 has to do with the VIN inspection fee, and that's really licensing. So that's not, I think we're at the end of elections. The rest of these are licensing and recording. So that in a nutshell is where we are with right now with legislation, and what the auditors are supporting and what we're not supporting, and what we're neutral on and why. So now that I've gone through all of that, it's a lot of information. Does anybody have questions?
Diana?
Yes.
This is Cam.
Hi, Cam.
Is it possible for you to send us that information electronically that
Yes.
you just shared?
Yeah, I think you weren't on yet. This is updated. Obviously it's a lot more bills than was on the agenda we originally sent out. And I said that I would get this new spreadsheet out to the group after the meeting today so that you'll have it.
Thank you.
You can see it. I'll take off the stuff that isn't related to elections so that you just have the elections bills. And
okay.
The other thing is, oh, thanks, Cindy, for coming. What's not showing up on here, and I thought it had a bill number, but it may not have a bill number yet. There is a proposed piece of legislation for ranked choice voting for the presidential primary. And there's a concern, the auditors are concerned about it because of the timing, because they want to put it in place and have us do it next year. And particularly because of all of the rules and WACs and policy and procedure that would have to be adopted, it would be, I don't know actually how we would implement it like next March when the presidential primary is. So that's a concern. And they also have written in the bill that the cast vote records need to be put on the internet, and they can't have the cast vote records. So that's another issue. But anyway, Myra, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just want to say that, there are a lot of bills, and I've been listening with a view to which ones I might recommend to people who are on my personal email list. And two that really stand out for me are the 1241, the harassment of election officials, which is one of my biggest concerns. Is there a Senate accompanying bill, companion bill?
Not yet.
Okay, so I really want 1241, and I hear your advocacy for 5459, the public records request.
Yeah, that one's a big deal for me.
So those two really, if I can't really urge people, if I have to narrow down what I'm going to urge people to support, those are the two I'm going to pick. They feel really important to me.
Okay. Thank you. So are there any other concerns with the current legislation, our position on it, or anything else that's going on in elections these days? I think Cam may not have heard. I may have told you though, Cam, that we're planning on doing open houses again this year for the primary. We'll probably do ad hoc tours during the general, one-on-one, if people just show up and have lots of questions or want to come in. So we're trying to expand our transparency and education.
I think what you did last year was good. I was down there working when some of those groups came through, and the conversation we could hear from some of them was good. It was educational and helpful to them. So I think that's good.
Myra?
Yes, I guess I just wanted to ask if Lummi Island is still anywhere on the list for getting a ballot drop box.
Stacy and I are planning on coming over to take a look. What I really want to do with Lummi Island is a similar thing that that Debbie did in Point Roberts, which is get it inside of a store. So it's installed inside, and then we would service it. We would open it up, when ballots go out. We'd close it election night. We'd empty it the next day. And then we wouldn't be going over and emptying it. And it can't be outside because of the weather, they just, one, it's a security concern, but it's also just from the weather because they get damp. So, but the logistics of trying to get on the ferry and the timing and service it regularly and the volume would say to me that we probably could do what we do in Point Roberts. I just have to find some place that would let me install it inside like we did at Point Roberts, and it works perfectly. And the store has been very helpful, and it's just right inside the store, and so it's secure because there's always people around, and it's out of the weather, and life is bliss. So yeah, Stacy and I are planning on seeing if we can find something similar.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Please let me, if you want to, please let me know when you plan to come and look.
I will. Okay. And the other thing I might let this group know is that I think I may have mentioned to you last year, the year before, the auditors had filed an unfunded mandate lawsuit against the state for the way that they were requiring us to put drop boxes in. We never have felt, I still don't feel that, I don't have a problem with them telling me I have to have one for town, one for so many registered voters. It was you have to have one in a census designated place for the post office. And the other thing is, it doesn't say anything about, leaving it up to the auditor's discretion if boxes are going to be within so many miles of each other, for example. So we put off putting in our last couple of boxes to see if that lawsuit was going to go anywhere. And in fact, it failed dramatically. And they basically said, yeah, it's not an unfunded mandate because you have a source to get the funds, which is not true. I can't bill for it. So anyway, Maple Falls used to be accommodated because the past census designated place boundary was right across the street from the Deming Library. And they redrew the boundary lines. And when they did that, they moved the boundary way closer to the center of Maple Falls by about 5 miles, which means we're not even close. And Maple Falls is a census designated place with the post office. So in the budget for this year, we got money to put the box there. So I'm in compliance with statute. So we're putting a box in Maple Falls, and we're working with the post office there. And the other place that is supposed to have one is the town of CEAC. And that was another one where we didn't have one there because it would have been within a mile of the next town over. And so we're going to be looking for a location in CEAC. So those will be our new ones. And then while we're doing that, and we've got one box that we can recycle, so we don't have to buy all new boxes. We took some out last 2 years ago, put bigger ones in. So we've got ones we're repurposing. But we would have to buy one for Lummi, and we'll probably have to buy a little one from CEAC. anyway, we're working on that. So at the same time that we're working on that, we'll be taking a look at Lummi Island, and Stacy has been taking the lead a lot on coordinating the Dropbox installations and refinishing them and getting sleeves on them and, you know, all that stuff. So we had the one that we had out at Sumas was underwater, so we ended up having to take it out and refinish it. And anyway, but you know, we found a place to repaint them for us, and so that's been nice. It's a lot cheaper than buying a new box. Anyway, that's what's going on with the Dropboxes.
Thank you.
Anything else that you want to know about what we're doing? Like I said, we're putting new stuff on our website. Kelly's been working on that. You might in another month or so go out and poke around and see what's new on our website. We are perpetually short-staffed. We have been since right before the 2020 general. No, the 21 general. So we're still getting everything done, but it's a challenge for the staff. They sort of move around. So right now we're down 2 in licensing. We're down 1 in elections, half of 1. We have a position that splits between elections and recording. So they work full-time in elections during election season, and they work full-time in recording the rest of the time. That position is vacant. So we're down 3 staff in the office. We don't always get everything done quite as fast as we'd like to because we're having to move people around, but that's what's going on generally in the office. We put security cameras in last year. I don't know if you know about that. We had security grant money. So we already had the streaming service. We've got the little webcams, and we use those for streaming in place of people coming in to observe if they want to. And that gets used pretty heavily during the election. So that's nice. We know people are using it. And then we had security money. So we actually put security cameras both in the election center and upstairs because it's a vote center. And so the security cameras capture what's going on at the counter and who's coming in the doors. So those are in. So that was new. And the county is going to be, last year they passed a law that specifically said that weapons could not be taken into a vote center. So people are having to go, it's a little awkward the way it's set up right now, because people that come in to the courthouse, they have to go through the security thing and then come back around to come into my office. But the facilities is going to be changing the whole first floor of the courthouse, because really the council chambers are part of the court because they do jury stuff in there. So people will start, everybody that comes in will have to go through security screening. So that will look different. It'll be a little more graceful trying to get into the auditor's office, but they're going to be resetting up the entire thing. So that will be new, and we're thinking that's going to be done in March. So next time you come in, if you know, or after March, if you come in, you'll see that the physical layout and you have to go through screening is going to be in place. And otherwise, Stacy, Amy, do you guys have anything? Kelly?
I don't. I think you covered everything.
We are working on our annual report again. As soon as we have the annual report finished, which probably won't be until around the 1st of March, we will send you all a copy of our annual report. People often like to look at that. It's got some really good data and comparisons in it, so you can sort of see how much is it costing us to do the election? How are people returning their ballots? Are people turning out to vote? That kind of thing. So that'll all be in there. Amy, you got anything?
No, you did great.
Okay, well, I will have Stacy send out, not Stacy, Kelly send out the updated spreadsheet, so you've got it. Excuse me. When the annual report gets finished, you'll get copies of that. And, you know, you always can call or email me or Amy or Stacy if you've got questions or suggestions. And we're happy to see you. So thank you for your interest.
Thank you.
You,
You're
Diane.
welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy the rest of your day.